Okay, so a gunman ran into a school full of kids. Police see him, but they don't open fire on him. Instead, the cops decide to hide. And then they refuse to even enter the school. And when some of the police finally stop peeing their pants long enough to try to do something, they claim that the door was locked. In the aftermath, the killer has slaughtered a bunch of kids. The police then give a series of conflicting and at times blatantly false accounts of their own failure to act, all the while telling tall tales about how brave they were, when in reality they were total cowards. No, I'm not talking about Robb Elementary School in Uvalde, Texas. I'm talking about the Parkland School shooting in Florida. When Nicholas Cruz attacked Mary Stoneman Douglas High School, the school's so-called resource officer, a sheriff's deputy named Scott Peterson, was there on campus. He didn't go into the school. Instead, he retreated from the danger and found a place to hide until it was all over. He's now facing 11 charges of neglect of a child, culpable negligence, and perjury. But you won't be surprised to learn that Peterson wasn't the only one who was hiding like a coward. A state commission that investigated the Parkland School massacre reported that 7 other sheriff's deputies arrived on the scene, and they reported hearing gunshots, which means that they were there while Cruz was killing those kids. But just like Peterson, these 7 deputies also stayed outside the school. They would claim that they had tried to enter the building, but the doors were locked. On a side note, when the authorities finally stopped peeing their pants long enough to look around, they sent out an APB describing the suspect, Nicholas Cruz, as being, quote, a white male with a burgundy ROTC shirt. And you'll also notice that Nicholas Cruz's hair color is now a lot darker than it was 4 years ago. Make of that what you will. But this culture of cowardice by the police goes back much farther than Parkland. It goes back over 20 years, all the way back to the Columbine Massacre, which was the first mass murder to take place at a school. In that incident, Dylan Klebold and Eric Harris began their slaughter at 11:19 a.m. when they shot a student who was eating lunch with some of his friends outside, killing him. And where were the police? They were on the school campus, just like Parkland. At 11:24 a.m., literally within 5 minutes of the first shot fired, the school's resource officer, a sheriff's deputy, was in the school parking lot. I don't know why it took him 5 minutes to actually get to Harris, but looking at what happened in Parkland, I think we can all take an educated guess. Anyway, this sheriff's deputy, he exchanged gunfire with Harris. 2 minutes after that, another sheriff's deputy arrived and Harris opened fire on him. That deputy also returned fire. Harris then ran back into the school. Up until this point, 3 students had been killed and 7 more people had been injured. 11:30 a.m., 6 minutes after the first deputies had exchanged gunfire with Harris, 4 other deputies arrived on the scene. None of them went into the school. In fact, they didn't even try. Instead, all they could think about was saving their own hides. So they took up positions behind their cars and waited for... well, I guess they were waiting for someone with a gun to show up, I suppose. At the same time that the police were safely cowering behind their cars, Klebold and Harris went into the school's library where 56 defenseless students and teachers had taken refuge. That's where they would murder 10 people and wound 12 others. This is what was going on while half a dozen armed and allegedly highly trained law enforcement officers were hiding and waiting for someone else to go stop the gunman. This is the vaunted police courage that the police are always telling us about and that the white media mindlessly parrots for them. The SWAT team didn't go into Columbine until 12:06 p.m., 47 minutes after the massacre had started. They entered from the west side of the school campus, which was on the opposite side of the school from where the massacre took place. The SWAT team would claim that they had misinterpreted the map that they were given, that they read it the wrong way. And the SWAT team took so long clearing the rooms that they didn't actually reach the wounded students until an hour and a half after the massacre was over. And it would be more than 3 hours before they finally got around to reaching the last of the wounded victims. So I trust by now that I've made the point that what happened in Uvalde wasn't some one-off. It wasn't some freak occurrence. It wasn't some one-time colossal act of incompetence. It wasn't some unprecedented failure to act. What the authorities did in Uvalde is what the police do in every city across this country. Uvalde is not some special case. It's not some isolated incident, but the white media desperately wants to con you into thinking that it was. This habitual practice of cowardice in the face of danger, that's standard operating procedure for the thugs with badges. They've always sat back and just watched whenever a school shooting takes place. In fact, there's a lot of other shootings that they just hide and head for the hills when it occurs. And already the white media and the police are working together to push the same old phony narrative that they always use whenever the racist, cowardly thugs in blue have committed some reprehensible act. That this is a training issue. That's right, the all-purpose lie that the white media and the police always trot out. Whatever went wrong, surely it was a training issue.
I'm Margaret Brennan in Washington. This week on Face the Nation, in the 5 days following the massacre of 19 children and 2 teachers at Robb Elementary School in Uvalde, Texas, the heartbreak has intensified as the outrage over the botched police response grows. We're learning more about the missed signals from the troubled 18-year-old shooter and what's now looking like an avalanche of errors on the part of the school district's law enforcement. Our coverage begins at the scene of Tuesday's shooting in Uvalde, and CBS News correspondent Omar Villafranca.
The sorrow is overwhelming. People come to this memorial behind me to pray and cry together. But they're also asking for answers and accountability from law enforcement and lawmakers. While thousands stopped to pray at the memorial in Uvalde's town square Saturday, even more are asking for answers as to what went wrong with the police response on Tuesday at Robb Elementary. These photos taken outside the school show state and federal officers pulling students and faculty out of the building, the children running to safety, horror clearly visible on their faces. At first, investigators said a school police officer confronted the shooter when he arrived on the scene. Troopers claimed he then ran inside, went on a shooting rampage, then was fatally shot by officers. But in the following days, law enforcement reports changed. On Friday, investigators said a school resource officer never confronted the shooter because the officer was not on campus. Troopers now say the 18-year-old gunman entered the building through a door that had been propped open by a teacher and immediately entered the 4th grade classroom. At one point, 19 officers, including members of a federal Border Patrol tactical unit ready to engage, were outside the classroom for more than 40 minutes, where the gunman was still firing rounds. But according to the Texas Department of Public Safety, the commanding officer, Uvalde Unified Schools Police Chief Pete Arredondo, made the decision to hold back officers, saying the situation was now a barricaded person, not an active shooter, and required different resources. A decision that investigators now say was the wrong move.
Of course it was not the right decision. It was the wrong decision, period. There's no excuse for that.
The decision is contrary to the state's active shooter response training, which the district went through, that states the best hope that innocent victims have is that officers immediately move into action to isolate, distract, or neutralize the threat, even if that means one officer acting alone.
So, as you see, the Texas Police's own training says that they must act, even if it's alone. It doesn't say sit and wait for backup. That's the training they received. So the police who are always telling us about how they kill black people because of training, and the white media who always repeats that lie and says, well, it's the training that's to blame. They ain't got much to say about this, do they? Did the police follow their training? Or, as black people have always said, did the police just do whatever they wanted to do? The Texas Rangers say that there were 19 officers on the scene, and those 19 officers did nothing for over 40 minutes while the killer was massacring those kids. 19 brave officers who did absolutely nothing for nearly an hour. 19 officers. And as a result, 19 little kids died. 19 kids died because 19 cowards were hiding, and now they're lying to cover up the fact that they abandoned those kids to die. Even with what was an undeniable act of mass cowardice, corruption, and immorality, the white media is still trying to prop up the lie that the problem isn't systemic, that it's not institutional, that the police are not the problem. All we have to do is have them attend a few seminars, a couple of remedial courses at the police academy, and next time they'll do differently. No amount of training can teach a white supremacist to be a decent human being, and no amount of training can give courage to a coward, which is what most police are. The problem wasn't that they weren't prepared. It's not that they didn't have enough weapons or that they didn't know enough about the situation. The problem is that oppressing black people is the police's job. So when it comes time to deal with a real threat, the public is on their own. The problem isn't that there was too much confusion. It's that they didn't want to go in because they were up against someone who wasn't an unarmed motorist or pedestrian. You see, the people who are normally the usual butt kissers and cheerleaders for the police, they can't use their usual lies on this one. Up until now, they were trying to defend the murders of black people with the lie that, well, they have to fire on anyone that moves because they feared for their lives. Why, these guys, they risk their lives for the public every day. They don't think about their own safety. They think about that of the public. So you got to give them a pass when they kill black people, unarmed black people, in a hail of bullets. All right then, the police in Uvalde feared for their lives when those kids were being murdered, so did they run in, ready to shoot anything that moved? No. They know in this case everyone expected them to go in there. This incident doesn't allow them to use the lies and deflections and weasel words that they use after they've murdered a black person. And yet they've engaged in the same pattern of lies, obfuscations, false reports, and refusals to tell the truth here as they have when they kill black people. So what does that tell you? A normal talking point that we hear, especially from white suburbanite mothers, is that the police keep us safe. It's their favorite go-to line for the white right, but also the white left. The reason that they use the word safe so much is because political consultants like Frank Lutz do focus group testing where they present their test groups with certain buzzwords to see which ones the people respond to the most. Safe was determined to be one of those words that certain voters responded to, especially white suburban women, which is why you hear it said all the time, whether someone's talking about war, healthcare, education, or the man on the moon. But that particular talking point, the police keep us safe, well, it was tested yet again last week, and it was proven to be a catastrophic lie. And the police have been tripping over their own forked tongues trying to explain why they did nothing. Their story has changed numerous times since the incident took place, and it's so radically different each time they tell it. It's obvious they're making it up. As police, even they ought to know how when somebody can't get their story straight, that means they're lying through their teeth. First, it was brave school resource officer was on the scene, and he engaged the gunman. That's what the head of the Texas DPS said. He made sure to throw in brave, just like the police and the police unions, and the white media always do. Police are always brave, especially when they're killing unarmed black people. Then the Texas DPS story became that there was a resource officer on the scene and that he engaged with the shooter, but not with gunfire. Now, to use the word engagement, that's weasel words. The only type of engagement that you can have in terms of combat is to fire on someone. Anything else is just making contact. Next, the police's story became, we're not sure a school resource officer was even there, but we'll circle back to you. And finally, they admitted there was no resource officer there, and they also admitted the police did nothing, didn't even try to enter the building while the massacre was going on, despite the fact that there were children in that room who were about to be killed who called 911 before they were slaughtered. So there's no denying that the police got there in plenty of time to stop the killer from murdering any more kids, but they refused to do anything because, as they put it, we could have been shot. Yeah, better those little kids get killed than you, right? Where are the racists who cheerlead for the police and tell us we can't question the police? They're trained law enforcement professionals. They know things we don't, and we can't question them. Where are they at now? They've been real quiet for the last week. Even the Texas Rangers are forced to admit that mistakes were made. The public knew that from the very beginning, though. You have idiots who are still trying to hold on to the lying talking points and deflections that they've been using, and now that the lies have run into reality, they're still repeating them anyway, even though they know it makes them look like liars because they need these lies. What happened last week was not some fluke. It is yet another example of what happens when you allow police and sheriff's departments to be completely and thoroughly infested with white supremacists and cowards and bigots. This is what you get. People refuse to punish the police for all of their criminality in the past, refuse to weed out the cowards, refuse to hold police accountable, and now little children are being slaughtered with impunity because the blue wall has turned out to be a wall of lies. But let me be honest, that wall of lies couldn't have stood for so long as it has without enablers who will tell any lie or push any falsehood to protect it. You know how after the police murder a black person, they and the white media are always quick to say that police put the safety of the public before their own well-being? That's their go-to lie that they like to tell. Police say it all the time. We only think of the public's safety, not our own. Well, that lie is dying a grisly death now, isn't it? And the white media and the cheerleaders for police barbarism who we usually see, they can't say anything in the police's defense. Even Fox News can't. Because they don't have the ability to demonize the victims here. They don't have the ability to demonize those little kids, so there's no one for them to try to distract attention onto, although some of them have been floating trial balloons that it's the teacher's fault. Here was a perfect tailor-made opportunity for them to show how they would put the safety of children ahead of their own well-being. And you had entire police departments and sheriff's departments who proved they could give less than a damn about public safety. Even those of little kids. They only cared about their own worthless behinds. After all their decades of lies and countless examples of how they have absolutely no courage whatsoever, the police have now committed an act of cowardice so egregious and inexcusable that the public is holding their feet to the fire for answers. Obviously, they're trying to get out in front of what they know to be their lies. They're trying to claim they didn't go in because they thought the shooter had barricaded himself inside. Obviously, that's just more spin. Does anyone seriously believe that they thought this was some kind of hostage situation? Who hears that there's an active shooter inside a school and thinks, oh, he must be there to take hostages or something? Surely he isn't there to harm those kids because nothing like that ever happens. See, the problem all you back the badge types are having with this one is that this wasn't one or two cops on the scene. This was dozens of them. Who waited while elementary kids, basically babies, were being slaughtered. Dozens of brave officers who only think of the safety of the public and not their own safety. And they knew that there was only one gunman, but apparently all those dozens of police were so scared that one lone teenage gunman would kill all of them. That one lone random 18-year-old gunman was going to kill almost 24 brave, highly trained police. Whatever happened to all their training? Whatever happened to all that time at the range? Police and their sycophantic enablers always tell us how we can't second-guess police because they're so specially trained on this or that. Well, from Columbine to Uvalde, we have to ask, how much training does it take to hide behind your police car? And to make sure that you stay away from where the gunman is while he's killing children? How much training does it take to teach someone that? All those cops there. And they were peeing their pants and soiling their britches because of one rando gunman in a school. They were all petrified. Not just one or two of them. All of these cowardly bastards were scared. They thought one teenage punk with a semi-automatic rifle was going to kill all of them. Don't they train for dealing with armed suspects? Don't they lecture us that the reason they have to gun down black people with a hair trigger is because that's their training? Well then, that gunman shouldn't have stood a chance, all of those highly trained police who are so well trained to kill in a split instant because of their training. Yeah, they're excellent at killing unarmed black people. But one armed teenager, and they all ran like cowards because they are cowards. And nobody can deny that this is all of them. You can't get away with the "it's just a few bad apples" lie on this one. Where's all the people who lectured us about how brave the police are now? Because it takes courage, you'll recall, to barge into an unarmed black person's home in the middle of the night and gun them down. It takes courage to beat black grandmothers on the side of the highway. It takes courage to murder black children either on a playground or in their own homes. Shooting unarmed black people in the back. That takes courage, because that's been the white media and the police's and their lying racist enablers' talking points for the longest time. All of them have been pushing that lie. And that's what got things to this point, where the police, as far as they're concerned, well, we've been getting away with it this long. Hell, we can just go ahead and just refuse to do our jobs under any circumstances, and it won't matter because the media's got our backs. There's been a lot of people in this country who defended those murders and told us how hard a job the police have and how we should be grateful because they keep the community safe. Where are those people at today? Because I can't find them, and I'll bet you can't either. Where are all the asinine suburbanite inbreds who love to throw around the word safe when talking about the police? Oh yeah, there were people who were talking about back the badge, back the blue, or all those other asinine slogans. Now all of a sudden we got people saying defund the police. Yeah, they're saying it now. All of a sudden defund the police is a hell of a lot more popular a slogan than it was before. And ain't nobody saying back the badge. And you've had a lot of these white leftists and such, like the Young Turks and some of these other clowns, who ask, well, oh man, why are these school resource officers even at these schools? Why are they armed if they're just going to run hide when a gunman shows up? What are they even doing there? Well, we as black people, we know exactly what those resource officers are doing at the schools. They're attacking black girls in class or attacking black children in the halls. That's what those resource officers are there for. Ever since 9/11, you've had the white media try to popularize a police lie that the police have told that they go running in while everyone else is running out. Actually, that's the fire department who does that. On 9/11, it was the fire department who was running in while everyone else was running out. But even if you want to believe the police propaganda, this goes ahead and shows you the stark reality, and it's a hell of a lot different now, isn't it? And the white media has been only too eager to repeat the police union line that officers have every right to kill a black person in a split instant because they got to go home to their families at night. The police should be able to go home to their families at night. That's one of the police's favorite go-to phrases to get white supremacists on code with them. That they have to shoot first. They got to kill an unarmed black person because, well, they have families to go home to. Notice how nobody is saying that now? Yeah, this is when you find out if all the police and their cheerleaders' lies carry any water. The police have made it clear their job is to make it home to their families. But that's the entire problem. Their job isn't to go home to their families. It's supposed to be to make sure that everyone else goes home to theirs. So white media, police cheerleaders, police unions, departments, all of you suck-ups and sorry scumbags, you're the ones who should take a bow right now because the massacre in Uvalde, just like Parkland, just like Columbine and all the others, this was the result of the lies that you told. This was the result of all the cheerleading and all of the wall of white noise that you threw up to go ahead and cover for the police and take their side when you knew that they were lying. Because of the fact that you refuse to hold them to any sort of standard, of course they're going to hide in the face of an active shooter. Of course they're going to leave children to die. Why shouldn't they? You have been defending and protecting and sticking up for them and praising them and supporting them every time they've done it in the past. Why should this instance be any different? This is your fault as much as it is those officers who refuse to do anything. Those of you who are backing the blue, backing the badge, and all the rest of the asinine slogans, this is as much your mistake as theirs. You're as guilty as they are. When you shower praise and adulation on a group who makes it a point to put their own safety before you and your children's, you're rewarding them for not protecting you. All of you people who have been covering for the police and justifying the murders they commit and repeating their talking points, which you know to be lies, you're as responsible for this tragedy as the police. These are the cowards who Biden was praising just a couple of weeks ago at that law enforcement memorial event. These are the cowards who Biden said he wants to give more money to, and he doesn't require that they meet any sort of standards before they get that money. These are the cowards who Biden said cities and states should divert their COVID relief money to. Next time some Fox News viewer or some half-cocked racist tries to drag out the line that we need police to keep us safe, you remind them of this. You remind them of all the active shooter events where police ran and hid. They don't keep anyone safe. 3/4 of the police are outright racist, and the ones who aren't racist are lazy public sector employees who are just trying to mark time until they get their state-funded pension. They're not trying to work, they're not trying to solve any crimes, and they're definitely not trying to save any lives. Now, the white supremacists on both the white left and the white right love to say, well, society needs some form of law enforcement. They deliberately ignore the fact that black people's entire point is that the U.S. doesn't have any law enforcement apparatus anywhere at any level. And that's the problem. These cowardly criminals, they're not law enforcement. They're just plain injustice. They're nothing more than a taxpayer-supported street gang, and a street gang won't protect a community. Hell, they won't even protect themselves. When you allow white supremacists to infest a police department, that police department becomes worthless. All you people who were cheerleading for the police when they were committing cowardly murders of black people and talking about how brave the police are, why are you so quiet now? Go ahead and tell us again how the police keep us safe. Tell us about how you want police around because they keep us safe. It's been a while since we've heard that particular line of crap, so why don't you drag it out now? The problem isn't that you didn't know, you've always known. The problem is when something like this happens, when you can't deny what occurred and the lies from the police are so blatant and clear, you can't deny they've lied, and it's obvious they were cowards, more concerned with saving their own butts than with saving those kids. Now that everything black people have ever said about the police, their lies, their corruption and cowardice has been proven and arguably true, with an example so reprehensible it can't be defended, now the liars who usually post comments online or who spout lies from their network studios are real quiet. Because the cowardice and the lies are so egregious, you suddenly have nothing to say in their defense. The only ones more pathetic than them is you. But give it a day or two. The cheerleaders for the cowards in blue will try to test the waters and see if it's too soon to go back to the old, disproven talking points. You've probably noticed how the white media tried to pretend to be very stern with the police early on. Pretend like, oh, we're holding their feet to the fire, we're asking tough questions. Well, there was some passing mention of the police's lies. Now that the cops have admitted they did all this wrong, all of a sudden the white media is pretending that that's good enough. Okay, they came up with the confession, they came up with the admission, and now we need to talk about the Republicans. They don't support background checks or assault weapons bans. See, the white media has already pivoted away from making the police the focus of this incident, and most people don't even notice how smoothly they did it. We're no longer talking about the police. Now the white media wants us to change the discussion to talking about policy. Because if we keep talking about the police, we're going to be talking about punishment. And in this case, it's going to be a hell of a lot of them getting punished. Sure, people online and in the general public are angry with police, but the agenda-setting media, that is CNN, MSNBC, New York Times, the three big networks, etc., they're shifting their coverage to pointing their microphones at Republican politicians. They're trying to shut down any and all talk about punishing the police because last time the white media got roped into that discussion, the uprisings of 2020 happened, and police are now being routinely indicted and convicted. And this latest tragedy has been just another reminder to the public that no, the police have not changed, they haven't improved. And after something like this, every cop in the country, from Long Beach to Palm Beach, from North Dakota to New Orleans, understands that when the public looks at them, they're going to be seeing the same cowards that they saw in Uvalde. The ordinarily quiet rebukes that people would give won't be so quiet anymore. The white media wants to get the spotlight off the police immediately. And there's no harm in using the Republicans as a distraction. The pasty white politicians are not the ones whose job it is to enforce white supremacy's rule anyway. That's the job of the police. You can discredit politicians because political whores come and go, but the system will keep on going, even with a changeover in power from Republicans to Democrats, same way it keeps humming along with a changeover from Democrats to Republicans. They're a distinction without a difference. What happened here wasn't a police failing, no matter what the white media tries to portray it as, because the police never carried out their jobs according to their so-called training to begin with. The white media and politicians have defended and praised the police while it was obvious that they've long been overrun and shot through with racist crooks and punks. And all the people who have suddenly woke up to what the police are and have always been, you're late to this conversation. And there's no excuse for it. There's no purpose that you can serve being here, so you might as well remain quiet. If you had to see the police cowering behind their cars while elementary school kids were being slaughtered, if that's what it took for you to finally realize why black people have said defund the police, and that these guys are a street gang and not law enforcement, if you needed to see 19 little kids murdered while the police sat there and did nothing, then you are useless. If the murders of Tamir Rice and Ayanna Jones and Breonna Taylor and all the others wasn't enough for you to understand that the culture of the police is a cesspool of cowardice and corruption, then this latest incident won't make much of an impression on you. A lot of these people who today are acting so outraged, and particularly in the white media, you're the ones who allowed the police to be cowards and for the lowest common denominator to become the norm in these departments. You were the ones who let the police have this institutional culture where racists and bigots and cowards get to become police chiefs and police commissioners. You allowed them to choose who gets to be in the police departments, and what a surprise! They always choose other cowards like themselves. And worst of all, you praised them and defended them against all critics, and you supported them no matter how many innocent people they killed. These school massacres bring to light many issues that need addressing, but by far the biggest issue of all is that there is no law enforcement in the United States. The lesson to be taken away from all this is that the police in the United States are not law enforcement at all. They're a taxpayer-funded street gang. And a street gang won't protect a community. It's just a damn shame that it took the cops allowing 19 children to be killed for some people to finally learn that. Good evening, and be one. I'd like to take a moment to mention some of our contributors: Nyan Pharmacy, Chaz, Ginger Vine, Gregory Franklin, and Mark Singleton. Salute to them, and thank you to everyone for listening, liking, and sharing this message. Black empowerment only exists because of you.